So hello everyone. Today we are very honored to invite John, the president of Neil Seattle, to share the vision, key milestones, and give an overview of Neil's disruptive platform. And basically, Neil uses digital identity and blockchain technology to create a smart economy. And as one of the traditions of the SEC seminars, would everyone in the room introduce them by using 2 or 3 sentences in who they are, what are they working on, and why they are attracted to this talk. Start from me. So I'm a volunteer for the Seattle Entrepreneur Club, and I usually serve here once a month for helping host the seminars. And during the daytime job, I'm a software engineer at Microsoft Teams. So maybe next thing.
Okay, so my name is Carl Weaver. I work for a company called Rivets Corp. We provide embedded software security for blockchain designed smartphones, Android-based blockchain designed smartphones. And I visited NEO in Shanghai, and I would like them to work with us, but they haven't signed my NDA. So John, let's talk.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, because it's a very big blockchain, but I'll just let you know. Do I get one more sentence? We signed a deal today with WAN Chain. They're using our technology. NEO, get on the ball. Work with Rivets to provide embedded software security for all these blockchain designed smartphones, which are coming in the market, right?
Yes.
From everybody. And what we do is protect the crypto wallet that you're going to download. So certainly, if anybody's going to download the NEO wallet, they want to protect it on an Android OS operating system.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Cool.
After the event.
After the event. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess it's my turn now. My name is Jeannie Zhang. I'm currently the VP of Engineering of GoDaddy. The reason that I'm here is that I've been watching this blockchain trend for years. Back in 2013 or 14, when I was running the e-commerce system for Expedia, my system supported Bitcoin as one of the payment instruments. That's when I first started. And very recently, I joined a startup. I joined their advisory board, and that startup company is called KeoCoin. What they are trying to do is that they use blockchain technology to solve a problem in the loyalty reward system in travel. And they're trying to solve the fragmentation problem that has been a hot problem in the industry for decades. And another part I'm also interested is that even within GoDaddy, we're trying to use blockchain technology to build a smart contract for domain. So there are just multiple ways that I found that this blockchain is very interesting, and it's very early in its stage. So just so much potential. So I just want to learn more about that.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Paul. I'm a software engineer at Uber. So the reason I came is because blockchain is I don't know much about blockchain, and I believe it will play an important role in the future. So that's why.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Tao, and I'm working on some side projects involving blockchain. So in the enterprise data governance space.
Very nice. Thank you.
My name is Chuan, and I, as a software engineer, so I came here for know more about the blockchain.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, John. My name is Aiko Wang. I work for Microsoft. Now I'm the architect for blockchain, voice engineering for some early customers.
Excellent.
And one reason is I know John.
That's right. I haven't seen you, in like 4 years?
Yeah.
3-4 years? We met in Beijing, I think, right? When I was visiting Microsoft Beijing, I think, right? So good to see you. It's been a long time.
So yeah, hope to meet with John, and also because blockchain is my daily work, so try to understand more about the ecosystem and also NEO.
Excellent. Maybe I can also learn from you now then. Thank you.
Ben Yang, also Microsoft, solution architect at Azure. I want to learn more about
Excellent. Thank you.
My name is Peng. I work with John on Neil, so that's what comes.
We're part of the same team.
Yeah. Hey, this is Hu Xiaoguan.
engineer in Microsoft. I did a couple of small projects.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dan. I work as a software engineer in Hong Kong. Very interesting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yu, software engineer from Microsoft. Just want to learn more about blockchain.
Very good. Thank you.
My name is Tiffany. We're just here to see what's going on.
All right. Welcome. Welcome.
My name is Tom. I work for Microsoft. I'm also interested in blockchain.
Excellent.
My name is Tom.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
My name is Wei. I work in Azure AI platform team. Today, I also do blockchain user growth stuff on the side. Today, I want to learn, like, at this time in the market, what do you guys think of the market itself, and what do you think of the existing apps in the market? Most of them are multi stuff. Even though people say they cannot be hacked, but they are hacked. So I want to get your opinion.
Certainly. Certainly. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm Jim. I work in DChecks. So we're trying to learn.
Definitely. Definitely. Thank you.
I'm Bowie. I just come to Seattle for like 2 months ago. I run some small business in Ohio before I come here for learn more about the NEO.
Definitely. Definitely. Do you own NEO?
No.
Not yet. Okay. All right.
Actually, also not come here for a long time. But blockchain and these areas are very interesting. Before I come to Seattle, actually to partly join as a head of company and also heard that it's like the contact company was actually we want to innovate kind of the way that you apply a blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the payment.
Yeah.
To support like it's actually a work and one way natural work and it's really become. I think that blockchain really is the technology of the future. So that's what I want to run.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jaden. I'm a graduate student at University of Washington. I used to be an engineer, and now I study communication. Now I have a graduate school focusing on blockchain, so I can do studies. I have a code that near last year because I bought some near, and I'm very interested in blockchain, so I want to study.
Excellent. Thank you.
My name is Hui. I currently work for GoDaddy as an engineer, and
thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamu, engineer from Airbnb. I'm just generally interested in the blockchain technology, so studying more.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
So now I will return the stage back to John. So let's give him one more round for the
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know it's Friday evening. You probably have busy your families, probably children, and you're here. So I want to really thank you and respect your time. I want to make sure it's useful for you. We have slides, we have some topics, but hopefully we don't go too long. And second, hopefully we address the topics of interest to you. Let's make it a discussion. For me and for Peng, it's been a journey. We've had to learn along the way. So certainly happy to share the journey as well. I think it's a fairly new space. It's still early in the game. So a lot of lessons learned in terms of how to think about what is blockchain and what is the platform and so on. But first about myself. So just to give you, you're probably wondering, who is this guy and why am I listening to him on Friday evening, right? So I'll give you a little bit of myself because it's always good to know, right? Is it worth listening to me or not? So I came to the US in 1994 to do my PhD in machine learning. So that was long before machine learning was cool. It became cool in the last 6 years, but I came to do my PhD in neural networks. My professor was a person called Andy Barto. Andy Barto is the father of recurrent neural networks. So very, very, I can talk about machine learning if you like, anytime you're interested. It's something very close to my heart. Spent a few years in the Valley, worked for enterprise companies, Sybase, came to Microsoft. At Microsoft, I did a few things. I built the first .NET architecture team back in 2001. So the very first .NET architecture team is something I built and led. I'm very happy to say that, very proud of that. Also built frameworks, tools, and libraries in .NET for many years. My team, we had the highest developer satisfaction of any framework in the developer division. So very happy, I'm very proud of that as well. Things like enterprise library, the service bus we built, and we're very happy it's still there somewhere. I also built Microsoft Digital, which was the company's digital transformation business. I took it from zero revenue, 9 people, to about 450 people, about $500 million of revenue over 5 years. So my strength is platforms, and then digital transformation. Those are my 2 areas of passion and strength as well. So anyway, for Neo, let's jump in. The question is often asked, what is next after the cloud? I'm sure we're all techies, we're all geeks. Some of us are entrepreneurs, we do startups, we do business, but certainly we are thinking about what is next, what is the next big trend. And I want to just show you this picture of this pendulum. It's a very green slide, I know, right, of this pendulum. So I came to the US, the Valley, 95, 96. At that time, client server was the big trend. Things like Car Builder, Visual Basic, was very, very popular at that time. But if you go back in time to the 70s and 80s, the pendulum was about centralized computing at mainframes. So IBM mainframes was really the epitome of centralized computing. And in the mid 90s, early 90s, it swung this way more to the individual, to the person, to the client. And so client server really was a shift away from centralized computing to the edge, if you will, to the edge in terms of PCs and Macintoshes, right? In the last maybe 10, 12 years, once again, it has swung back to the cloud, to centralized computing once again. In some sense, things like serverless, right? If you look at AWS serverless, you could argue serverless is back in some sense conceptually to the mainframe era in terms of the logical and the abstractions, right? Yes, different technology, more scalable, but at the core level, conceptually, we are swinging back again to centralized computing. So if you buy this theory of technology, of economics, of society, of social models, there is a pendulum to life. And having spent many years in China with my friend Pang and my other friends, the philosophy of thinking about life in terms of recurring themes, right? So if we believe that there is a recurring theme, there will be a shift away from the centralized model to the edge. But when we say edge, it's not just the endpoint. RFID, we all know RFID, right? RFID was edge also, right? IoT is edge, but the edge is not just a very simplistic, almost dumb endpoint. The edge is about computing. It's about intelligence. And so if you buy that premise, basically then, what is happening is a shift away from the centralized cloud model to decentralized platforms. Two perspectives. Technical. There is no single choke point in the application, in the system, in the services, in the network that can be attacked, which can lead to the system being compromised. When we say compromised, could be technical issues, could be obviously nefarious hacking issues, could be all kinds of compromisation. But fundamentally, there is no single choke point. And organizationally or socially, there is no single entity that can be compelled to compromise the system. So think about, for example, today's model of cloud computing. and as an ML person. So, I spent many years in machine learning. By the way, AI is bullshit, but machine learning, there's something in machine learning. And I have a PhD, so I could talk about AI if you like, but AI, machine learning, there's something there because we can recognize patterns. Machine learning for me is about looking for patterns in data, right? But if you look at the centralized computing, if you're running TensorFlow, right, on the Google Cloud, it is a centralized model of computing. And you're at the mercy of the model and the technology stack Google has. So for example, think about, most of us, we are computer science people, right? You probably remember back in your bachelor's days about Byzantine failures. Remember Byzantine failures in terms of algorithms, about the Byzantine general algorithm? When you have multiple generals attacking a single city or a fort, how do they collaborate without being compromised? So running an ML system on a single cloud, we will look back in 5 years and say, what were we doing? Today it's okay, we don't really care, right? We run this on AWS or Google, but 5 years from now, we'll look back and say, what were we thinking? So decentralization in terms of platforms, two perspectives, technical and then organizational. So when we talk about blockchain infrastructure, really what we're talking about is decentralized platforms. And blockchain is cool. It's obviously a very fancy, lot of buzz, a lot of marketing, certainly, but really think decentralized. I'll give you sort of my own journey, right? A few minutes in terms of how I saw this space. And maybe it'll be similar to what you have gone through, maybe at least a few of you. The very first time looking at this space, what I saw was crypto, the currency, right? I saw Bitcoin, I saw Ethereum, and I said, look, I'm a techie, I'm a geek. I'm not a speculator. I'm not a trader. So this is not for me. So I stepped away. That was the very first time you see it, right? And probably some of you had the same experience. You said, look, this is speculating, this is trading, what's in it for me? So you walk away. Then the second time around, I came back and I said, okay, so what is behind the currency? What is behind the technology? And it is this thing called the ledger, this distributed ledger technology. And so I said, oh, it's a database. What's the big deal? Right, it's a database. So we all know databases, SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase back in the days, or Informix, AWS, RDB. So basically, it's a database. What's the big deal? What is the big hype? What is the big hoopla? It's a database, right? I know SQL. I can design tables. I can do transactional processing. So I said, look, this is nothing. I go back. I walk back. The third time, and I said, look, Ethereum. Often NEO is often called as the Ethereum of China. So it's right behind Ethereum, right? So what Vitalik, who is the founder of Ethereum, so what he did was he took the ledger, and he put a virtual machine in every node. So when you put a virtual machine in every node, what do you have? You have a platform. You have a computing platform that is decentralized. And then I said, hang on a second, I'm a platform guy. This is a platform. This is a big change. And I said, okay, I was an idiot because I didn't see it in the beginning. I saw only the crypto and the database. But by the time I got to the platform, I said, look, this is a fundamental shift. I'm a platform guy. It's a huge shift. Because think of Bitcoin. Think of the Bitcoin technology as being a single scenario stack, a single use case. Right? Bitcoin is, in some sense, a single use case stack. What NEO, like Ethereum, is a multi-use case stack. So what was essentially a single scenario is now abstracted and becomes a generic platform. And that was, for me, the journey as we think about it. Even today, as we talk to people, we find that some folks are here. They're like, okay, so I trade NEO. Good, that's good, right? Some folks are saying, okay, we're talking to a Microsoft developer the other day. I won't name anybody. But we were talking to him, and he said, yeah, it's a database. What's the big deal? Why do I care? I know databases, right? But then as you have lunch with the gentleman, and you explain the VM infrastructure and the capability, then his eyes open up, and he says, okay, hang on a second. I had not seen this perspective. So I want to just give you this journey typically of people go through. So firstly, crypto. It's an asset. It's digital. It is essentially working as an exchange medium. And of course, uses very strong cryptography, right? This is the first typical perspective. And as I said, the decentralized control of cryptocurrency works through the DLT, typically a blockchain infrastructure. And of course, you will have the slides, so you can obviously look at the slides later. But this is more of the sort of the technical definition of what would be a crypto asset. Yes, sir.
John, is it 100% of the time you must use cryptocurrency in order to, say, write a smart contract in the blockchain? Or I've been hearing about Hyperledger. So this to me has always been very, very confusing because cryptocurrency, you use it to do something on the blockchain.
Yeah.
But is there another way on an edge device to do it, to get to the blockchain?
Yeah, it's a great question. So do we have to have a crypto token for a blockchain platform? We don't have to. In fact, if you hold on to this, I'll come to this in about 20 minutes or so, right? We don't have to. You can certainly have a blockchain platform that is decentralized that has a crypto token, right? That could be a currency, could be a token. It doesn't have to be a currency, it could be a token, right?
I understand.
Right, but also like I said, like things like Hyperledger or Corda, for example, you don't have to have necessarily a token for the platform to run. It's a great question. We'll come back in just if you hold on to it for a second. I'll keep moving. Any other questions here? All right, so the second is the DLT. So what is the DLT? A DLT is a consensus of replicated, shared, and synchronized data across multiple sites. There is no centralized administrator. There is no central storage. It's a DLT. And as you can imagine, immediately we say, okay, it's a database, right? Yes, it is a database, but it is a different kind of database. But if we stop right here, it's not really particularly disruptive. It is cool technology. It certainly has a role to play. It has use. But what is disruptive, what is truly transformational is that when we talk about the platform with the VM in every node like Neo or like Ethereum, being able to have a DApp, a decentralized app that runs on a decentralized network with a trustless protocol, then there's a whole new wave of applications. We are seeing, obviously, like somebody said, gaming applications. We are seeing gambling applications. We're seeing marketplaces. We are seeing, we're seeing enterprise. In the enterprise space, we're seeing supply chain applications. We are seeing healthcare. We're seeing manufacture. I'll come back to some more in my slide deck as well. But this is really the big, if you will, the big hoopla. Right? It is a platform play. And if it's a platform, we can build applications. And if we can build applications, then, as you know, every previous shift, client server, SOA, cloud, every shift causes enormous opportunity in terms of technology and economics. And this is why we believe we are at the beginning, at the cusp of this new shift. What happened in the cloud? We will see it happening again, but with the pendulum going the other way from central to decentralized. And like I said, think of Bitcoin as a single use case platform, right? It can do one thing, which is Bitcoin. But Neo is Bitcoin, but abstracted out. So you can basically apply your scenarios, your use cases, much like Ethereum and so on. So far, so good. I'll just pause for a couple of minutes. Questions? All right, makes sense, reasonably. Okay, we'll keep going.
Sorry,
yes.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
You talk about Bitcoin,
yeah.
which is a cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Right? And you also talk about digital ledger.
Yeah.
And then you talk about this decentralized platform. So how is digital ledger connected to the decentralized platform?
That's a great question. So, and you're right, because I call it Bitcoin here. So what we think of as Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, also has its own ledger.
Transactions, associated with transactions.
Exactly. And its own computational for the transactions, basically, for the debits, for the credits, right? But it's all embedded into one. And so when Nakamoto-san, maybe he's Japanese, I don't know, but when he did the Bitcoin protocol, basically it was all mashed up into one. So there was no differentiation of the currency from the protocol, from the database to the computation. It was all just sort of one big mashup. What happened since then is if you look at Ethereum, and certainly Neo, we are abstracting out the platform, which is the storage and the computational capability, as well as the token. But however, what is interesting is with Bitcoin, you had one currency, one token. With a Neo or an Ethereum, you have the ability to create your own custom tokens, right? And custom cryptocurrency as well if you want. And that's basically what became, it was a single scenario thing, becomes essentially an abstract multi-scenario stack, if you will. So if you break Bitcoin down, you will see at the logical and the physical level, you will see the ledger and you will see the computational capability. It's just not called out because there was no need for it at that time. Because nobody was building an app on you. There is no way to build an app on Bitcoin.
Right. So are you saying that, for instance, Bitcoin, essentially what you're saying is Bitcoin has the cryptocurrency part, has the ledger part, has the compute part, has the data store part. And then for your Neo Ethereum, you have the compute power and storage space. Those two, you extract those and put it in platform.
Exactly.
But then if whoever wants to build their own cryptocurrency,
exactly,
they can use your platform to build that currency and then build the associate ledger.
Build their own instance of the ledger. Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it. Makes sense.
Right. So basically, you have the database, but then you can have your own instance of the database, basically.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right. Makes sense so far?
Yes.
So before you start,
yeah,
the Neo benefits. So Ethereum has been really widely known as with a lot of problem with like a very low throughput and
yes,
also has high gas prices.
Yes.
Has Neo solved those issues in your platform?
Absolutely, we have.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm part of Neo. So I can tell you why Neo is uniquely different and superior.
Okay.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. Now, hold on. But it was a very good question you asked me yesterday. The thing is, there's a platform play here. And that was not so obvious in the early days of Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrency. So Vitalik was a genius. He saw that the VM edition makes this a Turing complete infrastructure. And so you all know when you have a Turing complete infrastructure, you have a platform basically to run any kind of application, right? All right, so let's move ahead. Let's look at the architecture model. It's a good segue. So DApps, I mean, we call them DApps, but basically decentralized applications, right? It's just a cool name for decentralized applications called DApps. So when someone says DApps, it's no big deal. It's a new app model. You have the browsers, basically, to be able to access the DApps.
The browser or the wallet?
The wallet, yeah, the wallet is one kind of client DApp, one kind of application, right? Most common probably, right? But the wallet is a DApp as well. And if you have a sports betting application, the client for the betting app is a DApp. If you have a marketplace for real estate, and people are basically trading or being able to exchange, slices of the real estate, it's a different kind of DApp. And you also have the browsers, basically, where if you don't want to build a DApp, you can access the platform from certain browsers who have add-ins.
Is that for a notebook or a mobile as well? Any,
right? So this is the key. So basically, you could have the custom DApp, or in some cases, you can use a browser and the browser add-in to access the platform. Makes it easier, simpler in terms of the access for the application. So for example, there are some wallets you can use, custom wallets, like I like Jax, maybe you have your own preferences. But also with things like MetaMask, for example, for Ethereum, you can use the browser. Same thing with Neo. You can have browser add-ons for the browser to access the wallet as well.
Is browser part of the platform?
The browser is not, but the browser add-ons in terms of augmenting the browser are part of the platform. We don't want to build a separate browser.
So the browser would have relation to the operating system of the device.
Yeah, so basically it could be Brave, it could be Chrome, right? Basically just the vanilla browser, but being able to have an add-in. So you probably know MetaMask, right? So Chrome has MetaMask. So MetaMask gives you from inside Chrome to access the entire Ethereum platform, right? So no custom DApp over there. Try it out. It's really cool. a simple add-in basically to your Brave browser, and you can access all of Ethereum. The same model for Neo as well. We have similar browser plugins, and so
It's a Chrome extension, right?
exactly. So as opposed to building a very complex D app, you could just go play with it, try it out, check it out.
I'm not a software programmer.
But just but use the add-in for the browser. Makes it very simple. So you have the D app on the browser for the access. Then you have like we said to your question, we have the logic, the storage, the comms, and then of course identity. This is the critical piece, right? Without this, there is not much happening on a decentralized platform.
That's where the crypto public and that's where the private key gets stored, right?
Certainly, and more as well, but across the space, for example, in terms of smart contract execution, but you're right, this is obviously a very critical pillar in terms of the platform itself. So to give you an example, maybe you're playing with the stacks, things like, for example, IPFS goes here. IPFS is basically a decentralized file system. Just go check it out. Really cool stuff, right? Check out. So StoreJ would go in here. Things like Whisper. Whisper is a decentralized comms protocol. Really cool stuff, really cool technology. Just go check it out, right? So we are seeing, much like what happened 12 years ago with SOA. When SOA became pervasive, there was orchestration, there was access and identity, there was storage, right? So all those things, basically with things like BizTalk server, things like orchestration, things like Auth0 and Bellevue, they do this for SOA and cloud-based applications. Something like Auth0 could happen for the decentralized platforms as well. So similar infrastructure, similar capabilities, but a whole different way of thinking about how you go build these applications. But very similar patterns, because you still need all of these pieces, and of course, you have tools as well. Tools to go design, to go build, to test, and so on and so forth.
Do those tools allow you to create a wallet?
The developer tools will do, yes. So you're right, you have developer tools, you obviously have management tools, right? In terms of the network, the infrastructure. And again, this would
be a Neo crypto wallet.
You could build a Neo crypto wallet using the Neo dev tools. This is a grossly simplified slide. My point is this: think of this new platform as having these core capabilities. When we think of Bitcoin, we didn't see all these perspectives, right? When you think of Ethereum and Neo, remember we have these perspectives and these capabilities. And we can build some very sophisticated applications using the platform infrastructure. All right, I'll keep moving on. So.
Sorry, can you go back?
Sure.
Are you going to do a little bit deep dive of each block?
A little bit, but not a whole lot. I figured we wouldn't have the time to go into every section, but certainly if you like, we can follow up or we can have a, yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So, but then I do have just two simple
yeah.
questions. One is that is your drawing a little bit of upside down?
The classic view, you're right. The classic view is the app is here,
Right.
and the plumbing is here, right?
Right.
The reason I flipped it is for a simple reason, which is that there is a whole network of nodes on top here. And that is the blockchain, right? That is the infrastructure. So I wanted to put that on top to flip it, but it's a very good question. The classical view would be app here, and then of course logic and storage and so on.
Yeah, because I'm a platform.
Yes.
Gail.
Yes.
I'm
yes.
a platform person, so this is just
yes.
a little bit counterintuitive.
Yes. But you can flip it if you want, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Another is that you did not talk about the contract or contracts and logic. So what's in that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So what is the contract? So there's this notion of what is called a smart contract. And I think the smart is just marketing. But anyway, the contract, what is the contract? A contract essentially is code, is logic across multiple nodes that enforces what is reliable, rigorous execution. So it could be, when we say contract, oftentimes, for me as a lay person, I think of things like legal contracts, right? I buy property, there is a contract, right? Or there's a transaction. I'm selling some assets. I'm selling some equity assets. So think of the contract essentially as code representation of one or more of these kinds of contracts. For example, right? the token economy is a very big scenario. So what does this mean? You know, you have, let's say, there is a house in Johannesburg, South Africa. So we could pull up. We could basically buy this property, and each of us has a slice, a token, if you will, of this infrastructure. And in the code, we have the logic, the contract which says that essentially you have 1/25 of this property. And we can enforce this thing. We can validate it, and we can version it.
How many people get the opportunity to validate that? Would it just be a small circle of people? Like, for example, okay, you bought the house in Johannesburg. You had the crypto. You bought it. It's yours. Your partner says, no, I have more crypto, so I own more. And the smart contract would say, no. We have the percentage breakdown, how much John owns and how much you own.
That's right. That's right. It's in the code.
But who gets to validate before it becomes immutable? I've always wondered, who gets to validate that? Do I get to validate that?
Yes.
I don't think so.
It's a great question, right? So basically, when you move from centralized to decentralized, this is the question. Who gets to say yes or no?
Well, not me. I don't even know.
Correct. So it's a great question. So in this world of decentralization, there is a concept called consensus. Consensus is the way for multiple nodes to come to an agreement. Because you don't want a single person in the middle, right? This is the old world for multiple reasons. Because one, they could be nefarious. Two, I'm more of a libertarian, so somebody in the middle who is basically extracting rent without clear value add is not a viable, sustainable model. For some time you can do it, but eventually you'll get caught out, right? So what this model gives you is the ability to not have a central rent-seeking parasite, if you will. And again, that's probably a bad word to use, but in some sense, a rent-seeking agent in the middle who's making money or some other rewards. In this world of decentralization, consensus is the key. So what is consensus? It's the way for multiple nodes to come to an agreement and say this is a valid transaction. And again, if you hold on for a few minutes, I'll come to consensus as well. So we had a very good question about what makes NEO different, what is consensus, how do we get to consensus, right? So we'll come back to the question if you will, right? So I want to just step back a little bit in terms of, so far it's been abstract, very abstract. So, but what can you do with it? And my assumption is that many of you are enterprise people. So I'll give you an enterprise perspective. If you have a consumer interest, we can certainly talk offline on it if you will, but my slides are mostly enterprise centric. So pardon me if I made the assumption that we are probably mostly Microsoft, Amazon, Google, kind of people, so that will be enterprise-y. Okay, so DApps in the enterprise, what does it give you? Why would you want to think about DApps and this new platform in the enterprise? So firstly, transparency. So the DLT is a public ledger. It is a public ledger. So basically, there is no transaction that happens without being able to see and verify it. There is no hidden transaction. So if you want transparency, for example, in a supply chain, right? You want transparency, DApps give you extreme transparency. Automation, like we said, smart contracts, right? Having the rules, having the logic, having the code in there allows the execution with a very high level of precision. Autonomy, there is no need for a central authority or a central entity. You can have essentially a group of nodes come together and have an agreement, a consensus. Obviously security, because cryptography is the fundamental basis of this infrastructure. So in terms of security, and again, we can talk for hours about the security and accountability. Because we have the contracts define the rights, like you said, in terms of the rights, and also the obligations. So we can codify. As a coder, as a developer, this is like the epitome, the high point in terms of being able to say code is king and queen. Because the smart contracts give us finally the window to put into code the logic up to the contract level. Now today, the contracts are not legal in the legal sense, but I certainly expect, I believe that in due course, we will have laws and regulations where, because this is probably much more precise, much more mathematical than any kind of analog on paper or something else, right? So this is some reasons why DApps in the enterprise. Now we can talk about the consumer space as well, but certainly in the enterprise space, transparency, automation, autonomy, security, of course, these are some very clear reasons why enterprises, big companies, people like Walmart, people like Amazon, Microsoft, certainly the big banks, Schwab, Bank of America, so they're all looking at this as a very viable set of infrastructure. Yes, sir.
So what you can be at the enterprise? Are you talking about a few set of enterprise? They have interaction with each other, or just for particular enterprise?
So it's a very good question. So this is a very good segue. So it's basically, for example, your question, right? Supply chain scenarios. So we're seeing basically, if you look at a supply chain, you have essentially a sort of a network of providers, vendors, and eventually the aggregators, right? In this case, you have more of multiple players coming together and seeing the value of the decentralized crypto-based infrastructure for value. Equally, for example, in some cases like banking and FinServ, we are seeing things like settlement happening across multiple banks. Today, so a simple question, I'll tell you why. Probably many of you trade. You probably have accounts, brokerage accounts, you probably trade, right? But think about it. The stock market is closed, what, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., and opens again at 9 a.m. the next day. Why? Why?
You settle.
Yes. We are still stuck in systems and rules from the 70s and the 60s. You look at the crypto market, they're open 24 hours a day. Right? It's a very simple question. Why? Why do we agree that our assets can only be traded from 9 to 4? And the big banks can do 4 to 5, but we cannot, right? Because you have the inside, obviously, right? So very simple question. And this is why, if you look at banking, they're saying, look, this what we have right now is a legacy platform. It's a legacy infrastructure. There is no reason why in a couple of years, we should not have 24/7 trading capability, because we have, like you said, the settlement capabilities via blockchain. Back in the early 70s, apparently I read this, I was not there at that time, apparently they had to have paper records being passed from bank to bank in the evening to reconcile. So we've come a long way.
Maybe in the future, every ATM on the planet will be able to be attested by a block in the blockchain for all the activity, but not getting cash out of the ATM. That's the banking side of things that we would really appreciate. I want to know if I didn't take money out of the bank, somebody stole money from my account on the bank. That's a great application, because now you can tell when it occurred. You can't tell who did it,
right,
but you can verify.
You have the record.
They also have a video actually watching you with a video.
That's right.
They can actually, if it wasn't you and that transaction was made at 4 p.m., but you were in another country,
yeah,
obviously somebody stole your currency, and
that's right.
And now they can authenticate that they can validate it was not you. It was somebody else.
That's exactly right. You're right. You're spot on. Just think about this. Right? Think about the scenarios. Exactly like you said in banking. If we accept the fact that we can only trade from 9 to 4, then you can stop thinking about this platform, right? But if you say, look, that is not acceptable, there has to be a better way. I want to be able to trade 24/7. Then this kind of platforms gives the opportunity for us to automate trading and settlement. Look at supply chain. So being able to track, for example, salmon from
food processing.
Yes,
that's almost a complete separate thing, isn't it? Number 8 should be food processing, right? Or
it certainly could be. You're right.
You're considering that part of supply chain.
Certainly, this is a very small subset. I mean, this is just there's so much happening. So if you look at supply chain, for example, think about in Tokyo, right? The fish market, Tsukiji fish market, right? Salmon goes from Tsukiji to almost everywhere in the world. And basically, they're looking at using essentially this infrastructure to track from Tsukiji to Bombay, to New Zealand, right? To Los Angeles. And so today, it's very much analog. It's not even digital. The possibilities. So you can say, look, I was talking to my kids. I have teenage daughters. They are in they want to do, they're in pre-med. And so talking about blockchain infrastructure, and they said, look, you know, the fish, there is a container, because we cannot track the fish yet. There is a container you can track. And her response was, with GMO, we could have a digital signature on the product, right? It's a bit out of the, far away, but think about the possibility of being able to say, look, everything could in some sense be digital. We can have a signature, even on something we think of today as impossible. It could be a vegetable, right? It could be a fruit. Now, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it could happen, right? That you could debate the pros and cons, but the fact is, what we see as today's world. Look at, for example, real estate. We spoke about, buying property, being able to have tokenization. There are things that we just cannot do because of the constraints, and we take it for granted. But if you go back and say, look, why is this way? Then all of a sudden the possibilities open up. And for me, this is really the exciting part. There are things that we've done for decades that suddenly we see the promise of new ways of building the infrastructure and building the apps. Right, one more. So here, I think there was a question about consensus in the nodes, right? There are three probably common patterns in terms of blockchain. One is the public. We all know the public. So Bitcoin is public, Neo, Ethereum, right? Public is basically where the nodes are up in the wild. But we are seeing basically some, much like if you remember back in the cloud days, right? 10 years ago, and Echo, you probably know this one, public cloud, private cloud. Very similar sense. People say, okay, you know what? I like the technology. I see the value, but I'm afraid. I want to close it off.
It's like an intranet.
Yes, precisely, like an intranet, right? So we're seeing, we can argue, is it right or wrong? We don't know, who knows, we don't care. But there is a trend inside the enterprise to exploit the platform because they're not ready yet. I would say many companies who entered the private cloud eventually went public, eventually, right? For economic reasons and otherwise. So
private means the company, just one company.
One company with multiple departments or LOBs.
Then why they need the decentralized solution?
Same thing, because we spoke about settlement, remember? Being able to settle things across the various divisions. The amount of time that the central systems take versus being able to settle these transactions very rapidly and give the visibility.
They might be testing it. It's just under construction. They might be doing that to test, right? Just to test how it works in a private environment before they go public.
Also, for example, when you have conglomerates of companies with multiple units, they prefer to keep it private among themselves. Basically, they have a holding company with sub-companies among them, and they say, okay, the risk, or at least the perception of the risk of public is too high for them. Makes sense. Makes sense,
I would think
right?
the Swiss bankers would love the private stuff.
Yes, 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 exactly. They like it. And in fact, even most companies today, and it's reasonable, much like the private cloud. You could have said, what a bad idea, maybe not, right? The same thing. Maybe eventually they will all move there, who knows? But there is a scenario right now where we are seeing, if you're an enterprise developer, there are probably many, many opportunities for you as you're looking at your own company in terms of the private blockchain. The third is the consortium. It's very interesting. So here is where there is a group of entities coming together. They are not the same company, but they're not public either. And so for reasons of privacy, of visibility of transactions, they're saying, look, for this consortium, we like the transparency, we like the visibility, we like the security, we like the scale and the volume, but this is about the consortium. There is no need for this to go public. Kind of a mixed hybrid, if you will. In this case, it's not the same company. And so these are three sort of early enterprise-ish patterns we are seeing in terms of adoption.
Maybe like technology alliances would be a great application.
Yes, that's right.
Like, for example, ITSE.
Yes. Marketplaces. So yeah, you're right. Basically, there's a huge number of. So again, I'm not saying right or wrong, but very in terms of the application. The point is that when people say, I cannot use Neo, it's public. You don't have to have the public Neo. You can have a private Neo. So I can't use, Bitcoin. Fair enough, you can't use Bitcoin. It's public.
Could you use Neo in a private sense? Could you take the Neo platform?
Yes.
And you could put it,
Yes.
or even a
Yes.
consortium?
Yes. So Neo is open source code. You can take Neo, you can run Neo on your own infrastructure. You can run Neo on the AWS cloud if you want, or Azure or Google. You could fork Neo. You could basically fork it and take it on if you want it. Right? That's the advantage you have.
If you fork it, don't.
Fork the code, not the chain. Fork the code.
Okay.
Yes. Not the chain. Thank you. You're right.
I feel that I have a question.
Sure, please, yeah.
For the consortium scenario, I guess a few companies work together.
Yeah.
In that sense, they need to bring their own computing device and join that network. Then my question becomes the competition among those kind of companies. If I bring more computing devices into this network, I will have more voting power.
Good question. Very good question. So basically, you want the consensus, right? About how do we get consensus? Who has control? This goes back to, again, your questions. Just hold it for a few minutes. But I want to pause. It's almost 8 o'clock. Maybe a quick bio break for a few minutes. Just, this is a good time. Let's just pause for 2 minutes. We'll come back in again. Yeah. And when you come back, we'll talk about Neo. What makes Neo unique? About consensus, about the developer experience, and about things like proof of work and so on.
John, I was wondering if you could get me a ticket for the other event in February.
Sure.
Because I've asked the Neo people. I don't think they understand about
Probably not.
edge device computing.
Probably not.
I visited their office. I don't think they understand about edge device computing. And I didn't want to upset your great presentation. But if you do want to touch into security,
Maybe a free QR code. Just scan the QR code.
So really? To go to that event in February.
Yes, that's right. There you go. It's easy. We'll do it.
Do you have a business card?
I did not bring it, but I'll speak on email. So John Davis.
Yeah. So will you talk about security at all?
Yes, yes.
Because for me, that's the most critical.
To some extent. I mean, the thing is, it's a very broad audience. So
Yeah, we don't want to get to the too nitty gritty. But then again, that's what I want to talk to you about.
We can do a follow-on. Let's have lunch or coffee. You're based here, aren't you?
I'm local, but I'm a China and India market specialist. That's my best.
Let's talk. Let's have lunch. Let's grab a talk. Very happy to give you all the time you need.
That's very nice. I didn't realize Neil actually had people. I've been talking to Johnson.
Oh, all right.
And also this new guy, Joe.
Joe Chen. Yeah, Johnson is the big guy. He's a good guy.
Well, yeah, he's the big guy, and there's another fellow. But basically, I'm trying to communicate with Joe, who they brought in recently to handle embedded solutions. So they haven't signed my NDA, but I really hope that they do.
But I want to learn more about what you have. Let's get lunch together.
I've got brochures that I'm going to give you as well. You love to eat technology, so I brought some stuff.
All right, thank you, sir.
But I don't want it to make this a pitch for my company.
Yeah. Let's follow. I'm based in Belgium. Yeah, I'm based in Belgium, so we can also get lunch and talk to you.
Okay.
Windows.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, appreciate it. Thank you. Should we keep going then?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So thus far, for the last maybe an hour, right, we spoke about the fundamentals of blockchain infrastructure, about DLTs, about the DApp platform, the capabilities, some scenarios, some patterns. I want to just shift into what makes NEO unique. And I'm sure you have a question in terms of why do you care? Yes, sir.
Before moving this, I actually have a question about
Sure.
user scenario cases, because when the ones we talk about are what people normally talk about generic scenarios.
Sure.
I want to understand like the NEO itself, like is there you guys actually cover those?
Definitely. So it's a very good question. We see gaming as being a very, very key scenario right now, right? It's a very pervasive global scenario for us at this point in time. However, if you go back to the vision, to Hongfei's vision for NEO, his vision is about what he calls a smart economy, being able to digitize any and all assets. It's a very broad vision, right? It's a very long view in his thinking, which I really respect and admire, right? So NEO has been designed, has been architected and built essentially as the platform for the smart economy. So being able to digitize any and all assets, so it could be real estate, could be housing, could be, it could be, for example, look at Uber, right? I think there was maybe it's Airbnb. So look at Uber, for example, being able to build something like an Uber as a peer-to-peer edge-based as possible. Now, Uber is so obviously dominant that it's unlikely at this point, but think about the scenario in the sense of being able to digitize any and all kinds of assets as the vision. And this means that there are things that, to be honest, I don't fully see yet, right? There is a leap here. There's a comment somebody made about decentralization and about this kind of infrastructure, which is the first step is going to be doing things that seem kind of obvious. Supply chain, right? Obviously, marketplaces, FinServ and banking. The fun is going to start when we begin breaking rules, right? That's when the fun is going to start. Because when you shift from central to decentralized, the central will fight back, right? Economically, certainly, regulations. So I will make a comment about ICOs. We all know about ICOs, right?
You need an ICO to make a token.
Yes, right, exactly, the coin offering. And this is a personal comment, not for NEO, so this is a personal comment, right? So please, if it's the recording, I want to say it's a personal comment.
We better shut off the camera. Shut off the camera.
So what the ICO gives us, or at least gave us, before the ICO as a startup, we could get to MVP, we could get to the customer, right? In terms of funding, capital, we had to go the classic way.
Very tough.
Right? We had to go seed, pre-series A, Series B. What the ICO did for the startup was to go to the customer directly to raise capital, which is a disruption. What happened? The central guy said, hang on, you can't do this. Why do they say? They say ostensibly to protect the investor. Maybe, maybe not. But I say it's because the central systems are struggling to understand and how to respond. The first response is, stop it, you can't do it. But as a citizen of China or the US, as a consumer.
Oh, that's very sensitive, ICOs in China.
Right? Yeah. As an investor, as an entrepreneur, I don't see why the ICO model should not be viable. Obviously with the right information and so on. So my point is to your question, you're right. We speak about the vanilla scenario, but the ones that are going to make a difference are those where we break the rules. We disrupt the rules.
You mean the law?
Not laws, regulations. But the regulations are stuck.
You mean the laws, not just the rules.
But they're stuck, right? And that's where we will see the really, I think, truly disruptive and transformative. And this is more of a personal, like I said, a personal comment, not a NEO comment.
This is very controversial, but I love controversy. Do you think that, let's say, I think the Chinese government would like to make their own new currency using some sort of digital currency. In this case, why is China 60% of the world's mining market is in China? Makes perfect sense. And if I were China, I would do the same thing. Create a new currency and have a bit, the key is it should be decentralized, right? It makes perfect sense. And if the U.S. does not really open up more of this market, actually China may be stopping cryptocurrencies. They may be stopping ICOs, but they're not stopping the blockchain. And there are lots of blockchain companies in China. And I think, don't quote me on that, that stopping ICOs in China is a temporary thing until China figures out itself how to monetize the usage of their own new digital currency. Not renminbi, not the RMB, not the renminbi, but something else. And the US needs to watch this, because if China doesn't do it, Malta will do it, other countries will do it. It makes perfect sense.
So I can only say no comment. I can't comment on that.
I can.
You can. But yes. Sure.
So, I mean, the app platform has been a concept for 5 years. But then you join the NEO at this time. So it's interesting to me because, I mean, you have a pretty good track record. First is why at this time, second is why.
Yeah, so this is actually a very good question. What makes NEO unique, right? We'll talk about, so I believe very passionately that NEO is very special, very different. I'll tell you why. So we spoke about consensus, about how do the nodes come together to agree, right? Today, for the most part, there are some very well-known algorithms, things like proof of work, where you have to mine and actually give up computational capacity to show that you've done the work. Proof of stake, and so on and so forth. So here's the issue. A platform that uses proof of work does not have absolute finality. Think about it. So basically what happens is this. So you have essentially a chain of nodes. You have new blocks, new transactions. In a proof of work, there is what is called probabilistic finality, meaning that the block you just added is probabilistically final. But there is always a probability that sometime down the line, you can come back and say, hang on a second, actually, this is the main chain, and this fork was actually not the main chain. Make sense? Because of the crypto algorithm, because of the nature of the proof of work, basically you're giving up essentially your compute capability. And if you think about it, it makes no sense, right? To say that I'm going to have a chain, but really there is no finality because probabilistically, I might come back and see that I'm on the wrong fork here. It works for Bitcoin.
Do you think it's possible everybody made a mistake when authentic or when they basically provided the proof of work? Maybe they all made a mistake. Is it possible? They wrote it to the blockchain. It's immutable now, but it's wrong.
But then, many people make mistakes.
It's 51%. It's not like 100%.
Right. So this notion of probabilistic finality, which is a result of proof of work, might work for the cryptocurrency. Might work for the dark web. Might. But cannot work for real life scenarios where when we add a new block, we have to add the new block and be done. We have to have finality. Otherwise, so basically this to me is a fundamental flaw in Ethereum, the most prominent platform out there. And this is why they are working very hard to move away from POW to proof of stake. Things like Casper and so on by Vitalik are efforts to move away. They realize. Now, of course, there are other things here, basically, like the huge amount of energy consumption in mining.
Yeah.
Right?
Move it to Eastern Washington.
Yes. I mean, it's not right, right? It's just not right. How could you have a next-gen platform that is so wasteful in terms of, right? It's just not right. The amount of money, of dollars, of RMB, I mean, invested in terms of proof of work is just ridiculously expensive. It might work for crypto, might work for the dark web, for a platform, it makes no sense, absolutely. So it's a learning. I think, I don't know if it was a mistake, it's a learning basically, right? So Ethereum is moving away from proof of work. Any blockchain, any DApp platform running POW, and many folks don't know this, the risk is that you do not have finality in the real sense, right? It's probabilistic. So what about proof of stake? In this case, what is called economic finality, which is POS is basically saying, rather than do the work, the mining, I'm going to stake the tokens I have as my bet that this is the right fork, this is the right chain. It's an economic finality. And what happens if it doesn't? You lose the stake, you lose economically, right? So it's not about mining and the energy consumption and the power and so on. You lose different way, but equally, it's a model that, again, we are moving from probably a pretty poor, infrastructure to something not much better. Why? Because in proof of stake, the nodes that have the tokens have more power. It is about more power consolidation. It's almost like we're moving back in time to the days of the feudal times, about kings and warlords, right? Basically, the more you have in terms of stake, the more control, which again, to me, makes no sense. Right? So basically moving from probably a bad to a still not so good approach. So what NEO does is, so NEO is different. By the way, NEO and Stellar are the two who have a very different approach in terms of consensus. There are some other smaller players, but Stellar, probably heard of Stellar, and NEO. So what does NEO do? NEO does not do POW or POS. NEO goes back to the basics of computer science, Byzantine fault tolerance. So the NEO token holders vote on delegates. The delegates then basically use the Byzantine algorithm, which if you remember is basically 3f plus 1 nodes. So up to a third of the nodes can be compromised, meaning they could be nefarious, they could have been hacked or taken over or corrupted. As long as less than a third of the nodes are compromised, you can get to consensus if you have 3f plus 1 nodes. So basically 4 at a minimum, but 4 is ridiculous. But right, so NEO is unique in that once you have a new block, it is final. So to do something like a supply chain scenario, you have to have finality absolutely, right? And this to me is a very unique, so this was very, very, very smart back when Hongfei and Eric designed the architecture to not use POW or POS, to think long-term and say, look, if we are building a platform for the smart economy, let's build the algorithm for consensus that is actually reflecting real-world scenario as opposed to something that is mostly, I think, made up, right? This was designed, if you think about it, again, not to be too critical, but who am I, right? So not to be too critical, but POW was designed for the Sybil attacks. So back to the cryptography, right? And it makes sense. Basically, you're doing things like, for example, the CAPTCHA, right? When we go to the web, there's the CAPTCHA. So the CAPTCHA is basically about responding to Sybil attacks, a way to make sure that it's a human being, there is not much in terms of nodes, right? So it made sense for some scenario, but for an app platform, we believe this actually makes a lot of sense. That's one reason why. And we can talk more as well. So developer tools. When you go to something like Ethereum, you have to learn a new language. It's called Solidity. So new language, new tool set for developing dApps. So what NEO did, what we have here is basically a virtual machine that takes IL, so Microsoft.NET IL, and then we can cross-compile it to NEO IL. So this means that you can build a dApp in JavaScript, Visual Basic if you want it, C++, Java, Kotlin, Go, you name it. So the fact that we realize and say, look, as a developer, you want to build a D app, it does not mean there has to be a special language and a new tool set. You ought to be able to use what you currently work today. If it is Java, sure. TypeScript, sure. Go, JavaScript, C#, you name it. So we have the ability, very unique across the platform, which to me reflects a developer mindset, a platform mindset, as opposed to something like Ethereum, where a new custom language and a whole new infrastructure reflects probably more of a solution mindset. And the reason, again, I appreciate Neo and see the value and the opportunity is a very unique developer perspective. So as I said, what happened here? There we go. So pick your language, pick your tool set. We have the libraries, we have the frameworks, we have the assets. There is more work to be done here. I'm not saying it's perfect. It's very early in the game. Part of what we're doing in Seattle is to build libraries and frameworks to make it easier for the developer. There is more to be done here. But this just opens the doors. This weekend, you could go in, you can start playing with it, build this, use C#, build a smart contract. There is no learning friction. There is no barrier to entry, which we believe is a very unique value proposition of the Neo platform. And there's more. We can talk more, but I want to emphasize these two, right? The developer experience, the tool set, and the algorithm for consensus. Because when I speak to people, I would say about 10 people, maybe 5 or 6 do not really think through the consensus algorithm and the implication. Because the POW has become so pervasively well known. But if you dig in and say, actually, what are the implications, right? If you want to build a real app today, think very carefully about the algorithm for consensus. Think about the developer experience, right? Otherwise, you're going to be stuck, finding very expensive, highly paid people from wherever they're going to show up. This is about, again, I respect Hongfei's vision. His vision is that we want to make this the most developer-friendly app platform. Again, not there yet fully, but we are certainly there on the journey in terms of the stack itself.
Can you please elaborate
Sure.
a little bit about the consensus algorithm?
Sure.
Because it sounds like what are you describing? It's sort of a reminder of a zookeeper about this election.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
Or Praxis. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
can you just talk a little bit more?
Yeah, just a little bit. So Zookeeper is essentially, or Praxis, is a consensus algorithm to essentially store state for a distributed set of services. So you have like a registry, for example, right? You can store a registry in Zookeeper, using Zookeeper. And the various nodes can access the registry, the state. It's more like a directory, maybe, for example, right? And it works very well for distributed scenarios. What is different about the Byzantine is that it's not about maintaining state for a set of services. It's about reconciliation across the various nodes. So in Zookeeper, you have the set of services, they are replicated, and they provide a naming service, for example, right, as part of the registry. And it works just fine. The reason why something like that does not go beyond being a registry or a naming service is things like POW, DFT give you the reconciliation capability to actually modify state and then propagate across the multiple nodes. It's a much deeper discussion, again, but it's a great question, right? Because, and I would certainly recommend, Google it, say Paxos versus BFT or Zookeeper versus BFT. It's a very good question. It tells me that basically, you're right, there is the logical path of thought process. You're saying, okay, if clearly these have flaws, then how do I think about consensus? And the natural step is, what about things like Paxos and Zookeeper, and then back to the classical BFT? And it is certainly possible that you could devise possibly your own infrastructure using a Paxos variant. It's certainly possible. I think the complexity of Paxos in terms of implementation is a very high bar, right? It's a very high bar to entry. And that's why it is not so pervasively adopted yet. Zookeeper is very well designed for that particular scenario of the registry. But we can follow up more in terms of if you like, yeah. All right, so basically, again, why NEO? We can talk a lot, but it's already 8:15. So think about the core consensus, think about the developer experience. What else? All right, so a little bit about the organization. So NEO, yes, is there a question? No. So NEO, there is the NEO Foundation, which is the nonprofit base for the essentially for the entities. We have NEO Global Development, which is the team along with the global communities, essentially focusing on the development of the stack and the platform. And this is highly confidential. We are basically launching NGD Seattle as a base for development to augment what's happening in Shanghai and elsewhere. There is NEO Global Capital, which is a set of funds investing in NEO-based startups to foster growth and adoption. It's a very detailed slide. I will not attempt to walk through, but certainly at your leisure, you can take a look at it. But here's the thing. So NEO, actually, it was 2014. It was called Ant Shares, was when NEO was first formed. Right after Ethereum, I think, became probably about 6 months or so after Ethereum. So very early on. And then in June 15, it was first on GitHub as open source. So we've had it on open source for about 4 years, or 3.5 years. The first mainnet was in 2016 October. So the mainnet is over 2 years in terms of active operational presence. And there's more, but I won't attempt to give you all the details, but certainly worth taking a look at some point to give you a sense of the history. NEO has been here for a long time. And certainly it's often called the Ethereum of China. And something we want to do is to basically make sure it stands on its own 2 feet, as opposed to being called the Ethereum of China, because we certainly believe we have a superior platform. We have superior consensus, we have superior tools and developer experience in terms of building. So just over 2 years in terms of the mainnet. There is a global community of NEO developers. So there's NGD, which is the NEO Global Development part of the foundation, but we also have developer communities in Europe and Asia, Australia, North America, people like City of Zion, NEL, NIO. There are many other worldwide communities that are building actively to enhance the platform, tool sets, frameworks, applications, exchanges. So there's a lot of activity going on in terms of the global. All right. Just a quick aside. This notion of the smart contract, if you're interested, go back and Google this. Back in 1994, Nick was a cryptographer. He was basically the man behind the notion of the smart contract, the legal the representation. And since then, obviously, it's become pervasive, but it's worth, if you have some time, just over the weekend, Google it and look up his paper. Certainly worth a read in terms of the right? And of course, NEO as a platform for smart contracts, like we said, you have compute storage and so on and so forth, right? Okay, so a few more slides in terms of, and again, I won't go through that, but certainly if you have time, if you like, you can certainly go play with it. You can run a private chain, run your own node if you want it. You know, like I said, if you like JavaScript, go build a simple smart contract, build a simple D app. If you like Java, sure, C#. If you like Python, go for it. I like Python. I think Python is very clean, very simple in terms of the space. So certainly we have a NEO Python VM as well. We have VMs on C# and Python and so on. If you like Go, give Go a go as well. And again, I will not go through the details, but certainly you have the information. I want to pause here. Maybe I'll call my colleague Peng, because Peng knows the professor, right? Peng, maybe you want to say a comment about this, because
yeah. So maybe
please.
I can speak. No, anyway, Professor Zhang, maybe you guys know, in December 1st, right? And today, this guy passed away, and he actually is leading a foundation called the Danhua Foundation. So he invested quite heavily in the blockchain space. And actually, there was a strong partnership between NEO and the brand and Danhua Capital. And later we'll talk about DevCon in Seattle, right? The original plan, Professor will come here to talk about the history around invest, we trust. But it's a pity, like, he passed away. But anyway, he is one of kind of the, I think he kind of one of the people who think he will win next Nobel Prize in Physics. and he passed away in December. Yeah, some words he said he's before blockchain. You know, we hope he didn't got that kind of trouble and come here. But anyways, there's a. John, maybe back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Peng. Yeah, just want to pause here, and thank you again for the context, because you know him obviously, and you've met him. So, but the notion of in math we trust, a platform for decentralization based on trust and consensus on math, on cryptography, is really the basis. There is all the fluff about cryptocurrency and speculation and trading. There is to talk about DLTs, but at the core, there's a very robust mathematical stack, and it doesn't get any better than that, right? And so I want to just call this out in terms of in math we trust is the core. This is a very sustaining long-term play. As a platform guy, I'm an old platform guy. I like platforms. This is a pretty cool, really amazing, early wave in terms of the next set of platforms. It reminds me of 07, 06 in terms of the cloud, and I was there. We saw it, right? It reminds me of what happened there. There's like, is it a buzzword? Is it real? Is it not? In public and private, and all this talk about what about security, right? You remember if you were there at that time? It's the same way, but this is truly a platform for the next era. The pendulum is shifting, will shift back from central to decentralized. And people like us who are there early, I think we have a tremendous opportunity to exploit, to build, to create value. Last thing is, so we have our second DevCon here in Seattle in about a couple of weeks. The first was in the Bay Area last year, Feb 16, 17. We will have a pretty strong set of speakers. Hong Fei Da will be here, Eric will be here, a lot of folks from Shanghai, folks from Microsoft, Amazon, folks from the public sector, the government will be talk about policy and regulation and so on. Would love to see you there. In fact, I think, Peng, maybe you want to talk about the,
yeah. So
let me just shift, yeah.
Because there's a WeChat QR code, the Sky, and in that group, I was in a promotion code to everybody, and basically you can go to DevCon for free, and you can pay any amount of money for that. So yeah, but we have a code actually, it's a Neo-John, but I will send out later in the group. And also could be a small chat group talk about if you believe decentralized application platform will be the next big thing. Let's have fun in that group, and there's a WeChat group.
Thank you, Peng. Yeah, so there's the QR code. Certainly would love to see you there. But more than the fact it's free, like Peng said, I want to echo, we want to create this community. Seattle is a platform city, obviously, for the cloud, right? It could be the platform city for blockchain as well, for the next wave of applications. So we want to create a small group, discuss, talk, get feedback, share what we know, what we learn. You give us back in return what you like and don't like.
So how would I get invited to present about mobile device security for the blockchain, which is what we do? Because you're a great public speaker. You really are.
Well, thank you, sir.
I mean, I'm no expert.
I'm working on it. But let's take it offline. Let's take it offline. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Okay. Certainly, we are certainly looking forward in terms of panels and discussions. There's probably an opportunity at this point. I wish we had met maybe a month ago because we're close to having the schedule.
I went to the office in Shanghai.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No problem.
But you know me now, so you can call me.
Thank you.
Yes. So anyway, that's basically it. It's almost 8:30. I want to pause maybe a few final questions. I strongly believe there is a shift happening. I cannot guarantee you how long it will take and how big it will be. I cannot, because I don't know. But I see the pattern. I see the emerging pattern. This is real. It's very big. There is technology impact, there is economic impact, and there is social impact. It's very big. And as you know, if you track currently where we are in terms of the economy, with things like QE and the Fed and all this, I mean, it's a pretty shaky time in terms of economics. And people are looking for new solutions, new answers. And I think there is a possibility here for us to do something, to build something that can be the next wave. Again, society, economics, and technology. So with that, I want to thank you. Any questions, please? Yes, sir.
So I know you want to be next fall computing as well. What are the phases that you see?
So it's a very good question. Very similar to what I saw with the cloud. pilots, a lot of pilots happening right now. This is the reality. Almost every company, pick a name, pick a company, there is a pilot happening. There is some proof of concept. It's just a reality. Could be a private blockchain. The next thing is in terms of consortia. Seeing a lot of people, come together as a group to explore consortia scenarios, right? Then on the other side, on the consumer side, explosion of scenarios. Basically think about the exchange, having a exchange, decentralized exchanges, right? In terms of marketplaces, in terms of, like we said, obviously gambling is a very big scenario. Sports, gaming. Gaming is huge because in gaming, there are no rules existing, right, for us to break. We can basically go create essentially new worlds, new models. So gaming is very big in terms of NEO. We are seeing, obviously, like I spoke about the exchanges, the exchanges, it's a very big scenario. In terms of trading, in terms of wallets, in terms of being able to, for example, things like liquidity. Being stuck with one exchange is not good for liquidity. Being able to have a cross-meta wallet.
Wallet should support multiple cryptocurrencies.
And multiple exchanges as well, right? Being able to have
exchanges.
Yes,
right?
exactly. So there's a whole wave of things happening across the consumer, enterprise, and all the way in between. I spoke about obviously 7 or 8 of the typical enterprise scenarios. But certainly happy to follow up offline. You have my email. You can ping me. Happy to meet up and discuss in more detail what we're seeing, what we're hearing. And also want to help you. If you like to play with the NEO stack, hopefully it's easy enough. Pick your language, right? Pick your tool set, go play with it. We want to help you. We want to give you some visibility, build something cool. We want to give you, maybe talk at the DevCon, maybe do a demo. Certainly very happy to help you anyway. Yes, sir.
So you compared a lot with NEO and Eastern. So you did not mention too much about Hyperledger. So what is number one? Number two is this NEO is handled in China. I would like to know how do you compete with Ant Finance, their blockchain solution?
So on the second one, I'm not familiar with the Ant Finance solutions.
Ant Financial, which is Alibaba.
Yeah, but I don't know how to compare them with NEO. Yeah.
Oh, you can let that off.
Yeah. So on the first one, Hyperledger. So Hyperledger is a very typical open source play. If you've been in the tech industry for about 20 years, you always know how it works, right? There's a proprietary play, there's an open source play. Hyperledger is basically IBM and a bunch of guys coming to it's a very robust solution. The one thing, if you ask me about comparing and contrasting, platforms like NEO have the unique advantage of having been proven in the real world at global scale. Something like Hyperledger does not have the same level of credibility. I'm not saying it can't skip, maybe it can, right? But being able to learn, have the exposure, the threat modeling, all the things we learn, we fix, that is a very unique advantage that people like NEO or Ethereum have.
They've got a head start.
Yeah, the fact that you have this huge public chain in running, right, and visible and out in the real world gives us a certain vantage point that we have a stack that can withstand all those challenges. NEO was not designed for the private chain scenario. However, it can run as a private chain, much like Hyperledger, if you wanted to.
So
Sure.
John, I'm curious, what's NEO.org's vision, mission, and charter?
Actually, we can go look at it right away. Let's look at it. If I have the connectivity. So I think I told you that basically the vision is about enabling the smart economy. Let's see if we can get there.
Next time you present, you'll be wearing the green NEO shirt.
I certainly will. I certainly will. Okay, I'm having trouble with Zoom, but so if you go to neo.org, you will see an open network for smart economy, right? Being able to provide a platform for this new economy to digitize any and all assets. That is the vision. It's a very long vision, very long view. Sure, if you can. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So it's a long view. It's a very long view in terms of where we are, right? But it's going to take some early steps, small steps. I don't want to, hype There's enough hype on this. There is enough hype on this already. Thank you. Right.
Partner curve galore.
Right. I don't want to hype it, but this fundamental. Thank you very much. But this fundamental notion, this idea, or that we can go from analog to digital, but not just digitization, but transformation, is very appealing. It's very appealing, right? And secondly, the fact that we can go from central to decentralized is very appealing, because central does not always mean good. Central can mean authority, can mean control, can mean censorship, can mean taking rent, right? Taking a cut of the pie for whatever reason, and it's very appealing. So that's another possibility. And thirdly, a stack that is powerful enough with the algorithm of consensus and also so developer friendly, I think opens up vistas and possibilities. And we feel like, so far it's been seen as the, again, like I said, Ethereum of China. And so we want to give it the visibility, the exposure, and the support for the ecosystem out of Seattle for North America. We think that once you get to play with it, you will see how elegant.
Why did they choose Seattle of all the cities?
It's a very good question. There's a lot of answers. And Pang will jump in as well. But I guess at the core, if you look at platforms, what is today's platform? Is a cloud platform. And where are the players?
We got them all here.
Right.
So I have a related question. What are your offerings? Software package or hosted platform service, or both?
Both. So you can go, obviously, you can run a Neo node on the public chain if you want it. You can take the source code, run it as a private if you want it. The plan is to work with the cloud stacks to have a managed service eventually. So you can go with Amazon and Azure to have it as a managed service. So you can basically go in and click on, say, okay, run a node for me. All the options. It's open source.
So do you have a hosted platform today that for people to come in to play around with?
There is a test net, so you can certainly go. Yeah, you can certainly go with the test net, and so that way.
How big is it?
I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you offhand, but I'll find out.
Okay.
It's a very small number, right? It's basically to just go play, get a sense of the stack, the experience, and so you will not see much in terms of scale, but it gives you enough to.
It's more like a playground.
Right. Exactly. It's a playground. Exactly.
Where is it hosted?
So the Neo nodes are right now in China and Western Europe and in Latin America. The plan is to grow more, to add more.
Maybe Eastern Washington.
Yeah, but hang on a second. We don't need the POW. We don't care about mining. We don't care about electricity, right? So see, there you go. This is a different.
That was pretty damn expensive. I'm thinking.
Yes.
Keep your office on the east side.
Yes.
Driving to Seattle, forget it.
That's right, Redmond probably. So I know it's well past 8:30, almost 8:40. I want to thank you again for your time. Really respect you being on a Friday evening. And I know it's hard, family, children, work. I mean, it's a long week. So really, thank you. Thank you for being here. I hope so. Some of you. Thank you again. You have my email, so please ping me anytime. And I want to see all of you at the DevCon. Yes. So thank you. Okay. Thank you.
John, this is awesome.
Thank you.
So would you mind?
Yeah, we'll have the recording basically.
Yeah, we're recording.
Yeah.